Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to Montreal. We're getting ready for the final practice session, FP3, coming up very shortly, and it's incredibly soggy here in Montreal. The rain has been falling all morning. There are puddles forming in the paddock and the pit lane. And there's a lot of work to do for the teams and drivers after yesterday's rather topsy-turvy day with stoppages, red flags and issues at the circuit. But we're looking forward to FP3 to understand a little bit more about what's to come this weekend as Max Verstappen comes into the Canadian Grand Prix weekend with a 53-point lead in the standings. To talk you through the FP3 session is the BBC Sports chief F1 writer Andrew Benson, Harry Benjamin as our lead commentator, and American racing driver Oliver Askew. Very good afternoon to you guys. It's a wet one out there, but it's an important one, and normally we sometimes see the teams waiting in the garages, but I imagine, Harry, they're going to be heading out pretty quickly.
Yeah, because the likelihood is we may well get a wet qualifying later on this afternoon as well, so they're going to need this kind of experience in these conditions. It's not exactly going to dry up and bright sunshine for the rest of the day, and as we said yesterday, running very, very limited indeed. We had an extra half an hour plugged onto FP2 to try and get this running, but then it absolutely pelted it down at the end. So it is crucial to get out there, and I think we're going to see a queue at the end of the pit lane.
And Andrew Benson, what did you learn from yesterday? Because there wasn't much to take away, with Mercedes topping the FP2 session, but perhaps that was in slightly more favourable conditions. Who are we looking out for today, not just in FP3 but in qualifying later?
Well, Rosanna, yesterday it was obviously bone dry until the end, as you said. Today it's pouring wet rain, and so it's hard to take anything from yesterday in terms of today, because I think it's going to be wet all day judging by the forecast. I think in terms of looking towards a dry race tomorrow, Ferrari looked perhaps surprisingly quick yesterday. They were definitely Red Bull's closest challengers in the dry. An encouraging day for them because they were very quick on race pace as well, which has been their massive weakness this year. Charles Leclerc was only half a tenth slower than Max Verstappen on an average lap time over a race sort of simulation run. So that's very encouraging for Ferrari, and then Aston Martin and Mercedes behind them in an order that's difficult to discern. Even Mercedes were saying don't look at the headline lap times because we were running at different times from everybody else.
And Oliver Askew, I'll bring you in on this one, because as a driver, you know, I've been soggy down in the pit lane, fine, that's okay. The fans have got a little bit damp in the grandstands, but as a driver, these stoppages, the changing conditions, how do you manage that when you know, as Andrew's just said, it might well be a dry race tomorrow, and yet you've got to go into sort of wet weather mode for these next few hours?
Sure, and let me just say, I don't think we've ever seen a wet, boring Formula One race weekend. Those words just don't go together. So I'm really looking forward to this session and qualifying later this afternoon. As a spectator, it's exciting, but yes, for these drivers, it's extremely difficult. The conditions are constantly changing, and as well for the teams, they need to be on top of the balance of the car, making sure it's in a comfortable window for the drivers, enabling them to build their confidence through the session, take control of the changing conditions, and yeah, I think we're going to see the best driver come out on top, whereas normally we see the best car in Formula One, you know, reach the pole position here on a Saturday afternoon. So I think it's the great equalizer. We're going to have a chance for drivers, let's say, that are struggling in the midfield to really show their talent here today.
Yeah, and there could be some surprise results. But yes, as you say, the drivers really earning their money and giving us a show today on this qualifying day here in Montreal. And just a little weather update for you. It was dry, or at least the rain had stopped, but just in the last few moments, raindrops starting to fall again, splashing the puddles that have already formed up and down the paddock and the pit lane. It's going to be a tricky one. You want to make sure your pit box is nice and dry when you come in for any sort of practice pit stops. It's a hard one to manage, not just on track, but also off track for the teams.
Absolutely it is. You know, they're going to be getting the blow dries out and trying to get any kind of advantage they can in their pit box. But equally, you make a mistake in FP3, you find the wall and you set yourself up for a lot of work to do to try and get out in time for qualifying, and especially with the limited running. And even you look at the likes of Alpine, both cars experiencing issues in free practice 1 and free practice 2. The Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, whose engine went kaput in FP2, they are going to be desperate to have clean running, not finding any kind of walls. And with this tricky track, it's very bumpy, the surface a little bit uneven, it could prove challenging.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting, Andrew, just looking at our pictures here. Fernando Alonso equipped with the full wet rain tires. We mentioned yesterday the difference between the intermediate and the full wet. Where do you see that going today?
Well, it's especially interesting, Ollie, because this full wet, it's a new tyre developed for this year. And it doesn't require tyre blankets to heat it up before you go out on track. Now, the extreme wet, as it's known, with the blue sidewall and the heavier tread pattern, over the years with Pirelli, the drivers have been very dissatisfied with that tyre. It just doesn't have the performance, which is why people would ask, why can't races start in really wet conditions? Why can't they drive in those? Why do they always wait with the safety car to a point where it's almost ready for Intus, which is the lighter treaded tyre? And that's because the wet tyre was so poor that the drivers didn't want to be on it. And this new extreme wet tyre is supposed to be better, and it doesn't require the blankets. So and this is the first time it's been properly tested, because in Monaco, when it was raining, people were on the Intus. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the drivers get on with that tyre, because it's very much full wet conditions. We just had a shot of the hairpin with standing water on the racing line, Ollie, as I'm sure you saw just now. So the next hour is going to be really interesting from that point of view.
Well, we're looking forward to FP3, the final hour of practice for the teams and drivers. I think the teams are going to be keen to get out there. So I'm going to hand it over to you guys, Harry Benjamin, Oliver Askew and Andrew Benson, to talk you through the next 60 minutes of this FP3 session.
Thank you very much, Rosanna Tennant. Green light at the end of the pit lane, and we are go for free practice 3. 58 minutes and 36 seconds on the clock, and it's the two Hasses who are first out on that full wet tyre. Nico Hülkenberg followed by Kevin Magnussen. Let's bring you up to speed with how the championship looks, though, overall, before we get into qualifying later on this afternoon. It is, of course, Max Verstappen, who leads the championship with 170 points to his name, 53 points more than his teammate Sergio Perez, who lies second ahead of Alonso, Hamilton and Russell, the top 5. Then over in the constructors, having won every single race so far this year, Red Bull have a 135-point lead in front of Mercedes, who moved ahead of Aston Martin last time around in Spain thanks to a double podium. They are now second, 18 points ahead of Aston Martin. Then it's Ferrari, Alpine, McLaren, Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri and Williams 10th and last, but everybody has points in the Constructors' Championship. And speaking of Williams, the sound you're hearing is a Williams. It's Logan Sargent, the American racer, one of 3 rookies in the field, teetering through turns 3 and 4. These conditions are looking very tricky. It's going to probably take a little while to try and clear up as well some of the grot and the dust and the debris that has come from the trees that overhang this circuit as well. Slightly stuck down now onto the surface thanks to the water coming in. It's a 4.36 kilometre length track, 2.7 miles.
So, Kev, we believe we should be staying out on wets.
Yeah, agree.
And that is Kevin Magnussen just being told what the plan is. So very much to stay out on wet, because, Oliver, it's very much wet weather as Kevin Magnussen approaches the slight right-hand kink of turn 5 and has a little moment, but he catches it nicely.
Yeah, certainly. You can see in his driving line entering these corners, he's trying to start rotating the car off of the traditional racing line, because we have had some dry running yesterday in FP1, FP2, and that rubber that's laid onto the track, that dry rubber, tends to be extremely slick in these wet conditions. So trying to rotate the car offline and then cross the traditional racing line to then put the power down in a straight line. So yeah, Kevin Magnussen going through the final hairpin now. Having a lot of traction oversteer, as we see both in the dry and wet conditions. That's just it's a combined traction exit there. So you're trying to steer right while trying to put the power down, and you're asking the tires to do 2 different things. It can be difficult sometimes.
And we saw Oliver, didn't we? There, he was on a wider line through the hairpin than a driver would normally be on, to avoid that standing water on the inside. You often see that in the wet. The water tends to gather around the curb, so the drivers are a little bit wider through the corners, which is the slower line in the dry, but quicker in the wet because there's more grip there.
So many puddles dotted around this track in all the divots and right on the apexes of most of the corners. Magnussen does come across the line. He eventually makes it round in a straight line with a best lap time of a 1:34.7 ahead of teammate Hülkenberg, 1:34.8. So those are the first lap times we've got on the board.
So I think one of the drivers to look out for today in terms of better than expected performance is Lando Norris and the McLaren, for 2 reasons. Here's George Russell's radio.
Bit of pull into the left-hand side at the brake. Copy that.
So he's obviously struggling a little bit with the Mercedes moving left under braking. So back to Lando Norris. He's really good in the wet anyway as a driver, but he's helped in these conditions by the McLaren's inherent characteristics. It's much better than some of the other cars at heating up its tyres, particularly the front tyres, and you really need that in the wet. It gives you the sort of confidence, and so you want the tyres to come in as soon as possible. So we saw Norris was quick in the wet in Spain. He qualified much higher than he should have done, and well, he went back. He would have gone backwards in the race even if he hadn't had a collision with Lewis Hamilton at the first corner and damaged his front wing. But I expect Lando Norris to be one of the starring figures today.
Well, also remember, if we get this kind of weather coming into qualifying as well, and it will be wet, but it just depends if we get another bit of downpour in between. This time last year was a wet qualifying session as well, and it was Fernando Alonso in the Alpine then who managed to get it on the front row, and he does come across the line, does Fernando Alonso, and sets the fastest lap time so far this time in an Aston Martin. He's got a 1:32.2. Everybody who was out there is on the wet tyre.
I want to play. Can I play Weatherman for a second?
Please.
I pulled up the radar on my computer, and I can say I'm quite sure that it's going to be wet for the remainder of this session, and most likely the day as well as we head into qualifying. So a lot of weather around the Montreal area.
What do you prefer, full wet or bone dry? Is that a bit of a stupid question? Because some people love racing in the rain. I remember Jenson Button used to come alive in the rain when he was racing in Formula One.
One or the other, nothing in between. Yeah. So, as we hear Alonso radio.
The blind guy with the Alpha Tauri. Yeah, that's Tsunoda, who's blind, Tsunoda.
That's a bit harsh. That was Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, who was getting a little bit checked up by Yuki Tsunoda. That was coming out of there, into and then out of the hairpin.
He's so great on the radio, Alonso, isn't he? Remember when he passed Sainz in Bahrain and just went, bye-bye.
As Oscar Piastri comes through turn 6 and 7 in the McLaren and has a little bit of a slide. He catches it and appears out of the water that is being kicked up from the surface. It's so difficult to actually see the cars at certain points, and then he really catches the curb coming into the right-hander of 8, loses the rear, but manages to keep it pointing in a straight direction. So clearly, nothing in between, full wet, bone dry. We don't want any of these intermediate conditions, not if you're Oliver Askew.
No, and to Yuki Tsunoda's defense, it is extremely difficult to see in these conditions, especially with the floor of these cars, you know, picking up that water and through the diffuser, kicking up all the what we call the rooster tail off the back of the car. As we see in our images here, like on the back straightaway heading into the Wall of Champions chicane, it's so difficult to see if you're behind another driver, let alone looking through your mirrors.
Hashtag BBC F1 if you want to get involved throughout the session. Send us your thoughts, comments, questions. Love to hear them. Also, you can get in touch via our email address as well. It's f1@bbc.co.uk, and we will do our best to get to them. But everybody so far is playing nice and neat and tidy. This is the sound of Esteban Ocon in the Alpine, who tiptoes his way through the final chicane. The Wall of Champions to your right, and foot probably not quite to the floor, but he does cross the line. He does set the fastest lap time. Here he is.
More rain expected, 9 minutes.
I was right.
You were ahead of the game, Askew. Ahead of the game. The teams need to sign you up, I think, for your weather updates. But a good lap time, well, a steady lap time, I should say, improving all the time from Ocon, a 1:34.4. This is the sound of Yuki Tsunoda, who just had a little skirmish with Fernando Alonso on the last lap around, but then manages to do a lovely 360 pirouette through turn 3, clips at the inside of the curb, but then loses the rear, and round he goes, but he manages to get it pointing back in a straight line and picks it back up again. So pirouetting Tsunoda. Rosanna.
I was just watching the Aston Martin team. Both drivers came in. It was Fernando Alonso before Lance Stroll, and they've put the intermediate tyres on, which I'm not sure. You might be able to see more of the track than me in terms of a drying line. But down here in the pit lane, I've just walked past the Mercedes pit box, and they're busy sweeping the water off the pit box area to make sure that's nice and dry when the drivers stop. So I'm not sure. Is it Inters? Should we be crossing over right now? It feels a bit damp for me.
Well, we're about to find out, Rosanna, aren't we? Fernando Alonso's on his outlap at the moment on those Inters, coming through turn 5 towards turn 6. Doesn't look too bad. In fact, he's not on an outlap, he's on a flying lap. He's just set a purple sector 1, Rosanna. So, yes, I think Fernando Alonso knows more about the conditions than you do.
He's not the only one either. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo has gone out on Inters. So have the 2 Ferraris, Leclerc and Sainz, all out on intermediates. So we're currently watching Fernando Alonso go into the braking zone of turn 8, but he runs a little bit deep. Here's Piastri.
Do you want to try and enter?
I think there's too much water for enter.
Ollie, this is when surely it becomes all about driver feedback and driver feel as to when you make that call.
Yeah, and I was going to say there's no jet dryer on the planet that can beat a Formula One car in drying the track. So as long as, at the moment, I don't think there are any drops of water falling. So yes, the track is going to dry very quickly, with how much downforce and how big the diffusers are in this car, just lifting the water off of the track. So it could play in Alonso's favor as he goes purple in Sector 1. We'll see how he closes the lap here.
Well, he's lost a lot of time in the middle sector, has Fernando Alonso.
He backed off going down the straight into
okay.
the final chicane, yeah. I think he was going to try again after that mistake at turn 8.
Yeah, that would make sense. He ran, late, long, I should say, into turn 8, and then that kind of put him on the back foot running into the hairpin. Yuki Tsunoda has gone fastest. He's still out there on the wet tyre. Max Verstappen has a little bit of a wiggle on the rear of that Red Bull as he comes through the final chicane, but this will be his first proper lap time on the board, and he goes third fastest in the Red Bull on 1:37. So it's Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Verstappen, Gasly, Magnussen, the top 5, Ocon, Perez, Hamilton, Piastri, and Alonso the top 10 as Lando Norris. Andrew Benson's one to watch if we get these kind of sessions in qualifying, these kind of conditions in qualifying later this afternoon. Has just popped up into SIG. This is the sound of Esteban Ocon, however, coming into the final chicane.
And Harry, we've got Fernando Alonso coming to the end of the second sector on what looks to be a really quick lap on those Inters.
Absolutely. Alonso's currently down in 12th spot at the moment, but he is lighting up the timing screens right now. Within the sectors, we have mini sectors as well, and it's all either purple or green on our timing board, so it's looking very nice indeed for Alonso, who is on that intermediate tyre. Leclerc has just started as well. He's in the first sector on an intermediate tyre, looking good in the first sector. This is the sound of Fernando Alonso coming to the end of his lap, and it was all looking so good up until the final chicane. He brakes at the end of the long back straight, trying to turn it into turn 13. The right-hander, but can't do it, has a slight lock-up, has to run straight through and cut the chicane.
Yeah, it's to Fernando's credit, if you're going to push the braking zone in any corner of the track, it's going to be that final chicane, because there's so much runoff and track available in case you do lock up, as he did there. He just, snatched the right front tire. We'll see a replay here of Fernando. Yeah, so it wasn't until he started bending into the first apex, lifting weight off of the right side of the car, when that right front started to lock. And as soon as that tire stops rotating, you under-rotate, get too much understeer, and you have to go straight on.
And Ollie, what was interesting there, we could hear on the audio there that just as he was coming towards the braking zone, Alonso was suffering some bouncing. So I wonder if that unsettled the car as he was just getting towards the braking point.
Yeah, certainly any kind of bottoming or porpoising in the braking zone is one, as a driver, it starts to shake your eyes. So you start to miss those braking references and turn-in references, and it's also unsettling the car. So certainly not what you want in a critical corner like that.
Leclerc went second on his intermediate lap time, just a tenth and a half or so back from Max Verstappen, who is fastest at the moment, a 1:29.1, but Verstappen is still on that full wet tyre. Sainz also put a lap time while we were chatting. He was 5th fastest. He's been dropped down to 6th now, but he's currently in the first sector and looking good for an overall best at the moment for him. Valtteri Bottas, who was looking very quick yesterday. I know it's hard to judge Friday's conditions and Friday sessions even in a regular weekend, but yesterday even more so due to the zero running in FP1 and the changeable conditions in FP2. But Bottas has been looking slightly better so far this weekend compared to recent results, because Bottas in that Alfa Romeo has not been looking good, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, on a replay here, visor cam of Lance Stroll locking up that same right front tire in a corner prior to Fernando Alonso, the final hairpin, now heading onto the back straightaway. Bottas going to P1, just over 2/10 over Max Verstappen. And let me just say, we're only 15 minutes into this free practice 3 session, so a lot of action to come.
Stroll again having to cut the final chicane, much like his teammate did the lap before. Stroll can't quite get it turned into the final right-left-hander of 13 and 14, has to bail out of it and try again. So, with 45 minutes and 5 seconds on the clock, it is Valtteri Bottas who currently has the fastest time at 1:28.9 ahead of Verstappen, Leclerc, Gasly, Perez. The top 5, Ocon, Sainz, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, Magnussen, the top 10, with a mixture of intermediate and wet tyre runners, but more and more, I think, will be heading on to that intermediate tyre, particularly after seeing Valtteri Bottas' time. This is the sound of Fernando Alonso once again, and he does manage to turn it into the final chicane this time, and you can really hear the bouncing coming into the braking zone, can't you, as he now floors it to the line, and this looks like it should go fastest.
Wow.
And it does by nearly 1.5 seconds. Now, if that isn't an indicator, we should probably all be on the intermediate tyre. I don't know what is.
Yeah, is he still the only one?
No, there's much more now. Everybody's on the intermediate tyre pretty much. Bar, let's have a look. I think Gasly is just finishing an end of a wet lap run. I wonder if he'll be coming, a full wet tyre run. I wonder if he'll be coming in. No, he goes again actually on the full wets, does Gasly. So too, Ocon's in the pits, and Yuki Tsunoda we're seeing having another spin of it coming into turn 2 and ends up having 2 wheels on the grass facing towards the pit lane entry, manages to get it back around again. So Tsunoda having a bit of fun out there, it seems.
Yeah, and it's not confidence inspiring for him. 2 spins already. Certainly not getting to grips with the condition or the car, whatever's going on with him in the cockpit. Certainly not happy.
That first spinner is Perez's radio.
So the interrunner is getting faster and faster, although the rain does look to be picking up.
Perez being told the intermediate's looking like a good tyre. Carlos Sainz is coming towards the line on what looks like to be a good lap in the Ferrari. Before I say anything else, I'll just wait to see what happens. He goes fastest ahead of Alonso by 2/10. I was just going to say about Tsunoda's spin there, Oliver. He was really lucky not to hit the wall on the exit of turn 4. He might argue it was driver skill that kept it out, but I don't think it was. I think it was just luck. He's going to have an accident if he's not careful, Yuki Tsunoda.
I didn't want to jinx it. I didn't want to give it the old commentator's curse, but so far, I know we are still at 43 minutes left of this session, but everyone going well at the moment. On Yuki Tsunoda, Ollie, what have you made of him, because this is the first time you're joining us this year on BBC Radio 5, on your first Formula 1 commentary, so it's brilliant to have you with us. But somebody like Yuki Tsunoda, in their 3rd year of Formula 1, came in quite rated and had a good start. He was fighting with Alonso, diving down the inside into turn 1 in Bahrain in his rookie year, and everyone was suddenly, who is this guy? It's amazing, and his character was brilliant on the radio as well, but then form kind of dipped, and we know at AlphaTauri, backed by Red Bull, of course, their second entry, if you will, there is pressure, particularly in that Red Bull young driver scheme. And since Gasly has now departed for Alpine this year, Tsunoda has really had to step up and try and take the team leader role, which I think everyone thought Nick de Vries might take, but it hasn't quite been the way.
No, and the best comparisons you can make in Formula 1 is to your teammate. And Nick de Vries is no slouch. I can tell you that.
You've raced him, haven't you?
Firsthand. Yeah, I went wheel to wheel with him last year in Formula E, and is an extremely talented driver. And yeah, I think he's done a great job. Certainly taking the role of a team leader this year and taking it to Nick de Vries so far.
Rosanna, what do you reckon?
What do I reckon? That's an open question, and it's about many things. But if we are talking about Yuki Tsunoda, I think, tricky little session for him so far. I'm sure he's got time to make it up. But he was struggling for pace yesterday, but he wasn't struggling for chat, I'll tell you that. He seems to have much more confidence this year, I think. He's really sort of grown into himself, and I'm sure his trainer, Michael Italiano, has played a big part in that. Obviously, Michael used to train Daniel Ricciardo, and we know the kind of vibrant team spirit those two had. But I think Yuki's really developing, and I think is a lovely character. Yesterday he was in the fan zone doing a bit of a Q&A with some of the fans, and he introduced himself, Je m'appelle Yuki. Just sweet little things like that I just think show that he's sort of starting to feel confident and happier in the paddock. I think obviously coming into Formula 1 is a big shock for all the drivers, and you sort of have to find your feet and then build yourself up, and I think Yuki's definitely doing that.
He has a quiet confidence about him. It just goes about his way. Seems to be working well with the team and personnel around him. As we see Albon
as always, just dangerous for the Ferraris all the time. Just stopped in the middle of the chicane.
Yeah, copy, that's Sainz.
Yeah, difficult with Albon trying to close a fast lap as Sainz in front of him trying to open a lap going through the Wall of Champions chicane. So a bit of
complaining there from Albon, but I think quite rightly so. Not impressed with that Ferrari, but just to perhaps close the Tsunoda chat off as well. Last year, I think it was halfway through the year, Dr. Helmut Marko, who heads up it was the Red Bull driver advisor, together with the Red Bull high-ups, decided that Yuki needed to move closer to the AlphaTauri team base and be in Faenza in Italy so he could be with the team to get his head and change his mentality around his attitude towards working out and going to the gym. I don't think he particularly quite enjoyed that. If anybody watched Drive to Survive, I think that came across quite clearly. But as Rosanna confirmed, speaking to his trainer, Michael Italiano, who's a name you might be familiar with, who's perhaps very well known for working with Daniel Ricciardo up until recently, Michael Italiano saying to me at the start of the season, Yuki's changed his mindset totally now, and he loves working out. It's just about finding what's right with him, and he really has taken, I think, that team leader role really well. And it frustrates me that he's been so fast, but because of that really tight midfield that we have, he's only been able to pick up 1 point here, 1 point there, or just miss out. It's not as simple as being able to have a great 6th place anymore for those teams that are in that midfield gaggle. Saying that, he's just popped it up into 2nd, just under 3/10 back from, well, now make that a 2nd back. He's been dropped down to 3rd because Charles Leclerc has come across the line fast as his teammate Sainz now joins him up there, just behind him in 2nd. So it's a Ferrari 1-2 at the moment.
Still, that just shows that he has a good head on his shoulders. After 2 spins, being able to go out, put that behind him, and focus on the task at hand. Yeah, running in the top 5 at the moment, just over a 2nd off Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, so it's Leclerc, Sainz, Hülkenberg, Tsunoda, Verstappen, the top 5, Norris, Perez, Magnussen, Alonso, Bottas, the top 10, Piastri, then it is Stroll, Zhou Guanyu, Nick De Vries and George Russell, the top 15, Albon, Gasly, Sargent, Ocon and Lewis Hamilton down in 20th at the moment. He is out on track and he is currently lighting up the timing screen in the 1st sector. Personal bests for the 7-time champ at the moment at a track that he has won 7 times over. Do you think, Ollie, we can generally see Mercedes sustain this improved form? We've got such a different type of track here compared to what we had in Barcelona, where they got 2 podiums. You know, here we have lots of long straights where you need a lot of low drag, slow speed corners and chicanes as well, all mixed together. But if anyone can do it, right, it's surely the guy that's run 7 times around here.
Sure, and this, here's Verstappen radio quickly.
These downshifts are just getting worse and worse, lap after lap.
It sounds like there's no change available whilst you're on track at the moment, Max.
Ooh! It's always the downshifts, and Albon once again just coming a cropper into the final chicane. It was a real traffic jam there. He didn't quite know where to go. The rear really kicked out. He slid down the inside. I think it was a Ferrari there, and then had to just cut the chicane. But there were 3 cars involved in that. They all make it through. But that was something that would have put a heart-in-mouth moment for him. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton, who is coming across the line now and is plumb last at the moment, but this should put him up. And it's 10th at the moment, 1.9 seconds off the pace for Lewis Hamilton. Didn't have a brilliant last sector.
Yeah, I wasn't able to finish my answer to your question there, but yeah, seeing Lewis Hamilton jump up to 10th, certainly not where I would expect him to be in these conditions. I think he's extremely confident in the wet, and he's shown time and time again to really make the difference in these conditions as a driver. So yeah, we'll see here with just over 36 minutes left to go in FP3. Andrew, you think the downshift comment from Max Verstappen could just be code for something else? Because it doesn't make sense to me how these downshifts can be so terrible weekend after weekend. He's
very sensitive to the engine braking side of things. So you could probably explain that better than I can. In fact, you definitely can explain it better than I can. But it's to do with corner entry that he's bothered about. And he wants a particular behaviour from the car. And if the downshifts don't work with that behaviour, it's a really big issue for him.
Yeah, and RPM is directly synced to how the as far as I understand, directly synced to how the differential is working on corner entry. With more RPM, versus less RPM, it can make a difference in less understeer, more oversteer, as we see Perez.
I couldn't stop that.
Yeah, we lost a bit of tyre temp.
Yeah, Perez having braking issues into turn one, and as well with those downshifts, if they're not synced properly in these conditions, with how slippery they are, they can often slow down the rear axle under the braking zone and cause entry instability.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the drivers have this. There's one particular thing that they really need. So we're seeing a replay here of Alex Albon. Here's some radio.
That has to go to the stewards now. It's the same guy again.
I was going to say earlier, I was watching the time screens, it was Carlos Sainz who Alex Albon got tangled up with as he was on a fast lap at the same corner again, and it was quite dangerous. I can see why Albon's a bit annoyed about that. But just to finish my point, you get certain drivers do have certain characteristics of the car that they really need to be able to be fast. So Fernando Alonso, for example, for him, it's all about steering feel. The feel of the front tyres through the steering. And sometimes the power steering of Formula One cars doesn't give him that feel. And he always asks the team to give him more torque in the power steering, more feel, because sometimes they're a bit numb. And he needs that numbness taken away to perform at his best level. And with Verstappen, it's obviously something different. It's to do with the relationship between the downshifts and how they interact with the rear of the car as he's turning into the corner.
Lots of fast lap times being set just in those last couple of moments. Leclerc now leads, has the fastest lap time of 1:24.8 ahead of Verstappen. Sainz. Norris has popped up into fourth place, so loves these wet conditions, especially in that McLaren. Always seems to go well, and Albon managed to get finally a proper lap on the board, and it's currently good enough for 10th at the moment. Just the 10th in front of his teammate, Logan Sargent, which is a good gap to have between those two. Logan Sargent, one of the three rookies in this field, along with Oscar Piastri and Nick De Vries. This is the sound of Max Verstappen in the Red Bull as he comes out of the hairpin up through the gears, and we saw Leclerc have a little bit of a moment, just the car massively switched on him as he was heading out through the traction zone of the hairpin and down the back straight, but he managed to keep it going. Verstappen breaks into the final chicane, clouts the right-hand side curve, has to do a little bit of catching on the wheel, and will cross the line, and he's currently second fastest, and he finds a big chunk of time in that final sector and is now over 3/10 clear at the top.
Yeah, I've always found Max Verstappen, after watching onboards, to use a lot of engine braking, and he really likes to stress that engine and use high RPM and early downshifts entering the corner, as we see Esteban Ocon. What is that, turn 3, 4?
Oh, yeah, that's Sebastian Vettel corner.
Yeah, so locking up, going straight on through the grass there. No harm, no foul.
Just giving it a bit of a mow.
Maybe just a flat spot on the right front there, but he'll get a bill from track maintenance.
As we get a couple of action shot replays of a few drivers doing some great slow-mo catching of their cars. Oscar Piastri, the latest in his McLaren. We said his teammate, Lando Norris, up in fourth at the moment. Ollie, what have you made? Because you've had a relationship with McLaren in the past through your IndyCar racing as well. What have you made of the situation that Lando Norris currently finds himself in? McLaren very much taking a step backwards with the introduction of these new regulations, when very much over the last few years they were going up and up and up again. And now Norris finds himself, he has a long-term contract, but he is hot property among some of the top teams. There's talk that with his former team principal, Andreas Seidel, who moved across to Audi to become the CEO when they will come in with the Sauber Group in 2026. There's talk of Norris perhaps going there, an option. What do you see the future for Lando Norris?
Well, it depends on the future of McLaren and their performance, in my opinion. Lando Norris certainly has the talent and the potential to fight for a world championship, given the car.
Oh, sorry, Ollie. Big crash, just to interrupt you there. Carlos Sainz. We had a yellow flag come out in turn one, and I think he has come into turn one, and somehow the car has got away with him, because he is missing the complete front wing of his car, the front end of his car. The rear has taken a huge hit as well. He's taking the steering wheel out and perching it just to the side of the halo, and that has brought out a red flag. So we'll hear from him now.
Sorry, guys. Crashed.
that's 30 minutes of crucial running that he will miss heading into qualifying. Doesn't look like there's any bad structural damage as far as the corners of the car. Just certainly some to the front wing and rear wing. So shouldn't be a huge repair job, but yeah, half of the session gone for him.
Yeah, we haven't quite seen how it happened yet, but it looks like he's definitely hit the wall on entry.
He's definitely hit the wall.
Into turn one.
There's no doubt about that.
Thanks, Ollie. I think he's definitely the rear end has had a huge amount of damage to it as well, but the rear wing is still on, but it's dislodged massively, and the front wing is completely non-existent at the moment. So Sainz just taking his time to get out of the car as he removes the headrest, the steering wheel already out, and the marshal's getting to work very quickly to get the crane and cinch that Ferrari away once Sainz is clear. But that has brought out the red flag, so everybody has to come back to the pits. In practice, when a red flag comes out, the clock continues to count down. So it isn't just Carlos Sainz now that is missing a crucial perhaps 30 minutes of running. All the drivers are now missing running. Let's see how it pans out. Ollie, talk us through this.
Yeah, so looking calm here, continuing on another push lap, hits the brakes into turn one. Oh, and he catches, this is a point that I wanted to make earlier, he catches the paint on the right side of the track on deceleration, and paint in the wet is super slick, as we see drivers trying to avoid that on the exit of the final chicane as well. So yeah, taking the front wing clean off on the right side barrier into turn one, and then also spins around and whacks the rear.
Yeah.
So could have been worse.
Could have been worse, but just that first impact really swiped the front wing off, and then it speared him back around on the rear end into the Armco barrier as well, and his Ferrari team watching on from the garage, not too happy with that one, but good to see Carlos Sainz then talking on the radio and able to get out of the car. And the Ferrari fans in the stands, you heard the shock in the grandstands and the screams, and we're seeing the emotion from some of the Ferrari fans that have made it out here into Canada. But the marshals already doing a brilliant quick job of getting that Ferrari and bits of the debris cleared out. So hopefully it will only be a few more minutes until we get back out and running. So we should still very much be able to get 20 or so minutes of running left for this free practice 3 session, and the last of the practice sessions that they will get before we go into qualifying later this afternoon. But for Sainz, unfortunately, who has been looking rather good so far in all sessions, in all conditions, along with Charles Leclerc and that Ferrari, this is a massive slap in the face now, isn't it? Yeah, certainly. What do you think this does to someone like Sainz and his confidence for the qualifying?
Sainz is an experienced driver. He has the talent and the whereabouts to put this behind him and focus on the task at hand in front of him here. Yes, he's going to miss a good chunk of the session, but from my weather prediction, we could have a completely different track here entering qualifying. So that's certainly what he's hoping for.
Well, everybody else back into the garage then. Did we finish the point on Lando Norris? I don't think we did we? I don't know if we finished it. What do you see for him? Where's he going to go? Is he going to stay at McLaren?
The point is, he's not going to stay there if he doesn't have a competitive car. That's all I have to say about it.
Well, and McLaren have been working on lots of new infrastructure at their base in Woking as well. In the United Kingdom, a new wind tunnel scheduled to come online, or at least be calibrated, I think, in the next couple of months, Andrew.
Yeah, also, Andrea Stella, the team principal, was talking yesterday about giving a bit more detail about the upgrades that McLaren have got planned for the next couple of races. When I spoke to him in Monaco, he wasn't so sure exactly when those upgrades were going to come, or at least he wouldn't specify. But what he said yesterday was that they're actually going to come, there's so many upgrades that they're going to come over 3 races through Austria, which is the next one after Canada, then Silverstone, and then Hungary. And he's talking about basically the entire car. We're just watching another replay of Sainz crashing. It's quite a lot. Although the wheels looked straight when he came to a rest, he's definitely broken the track rod on the front left there. And I think he may have done some damage to the rear, possibly the gearbox and drive shaft, because he hit the rear as well. So anyway, so back to McLaren. he said it's not. He wouldn't call it. He said he wouldn't call it a B spec because there's not a new monocoque. But if it's everything else apart from the monocoque, it's basically pretty much a new car. He did kind of say that. So big changes to come from McLaren over the next 3 races. So we'll see how that affects their competitiveness. But you're right, Harry. The wind tunnel is part of a big infrastructure program that McLaren have been going through. They've been using it's actually the former Toyota Formula One wind tunnel in Cologne for the last 10 years or so. And that tunnel is now a bit out of date in terms of modern Formula One technology, and they feel that's been holding them back. They've also got a new driver-in-loop simulator being developed at the factory because they feel theirs has fallen behind the times as well. And so they're working towards a place where they think they should be competitive for 2025, which is the final year of Norris's contract. All I would say about that is that with a new wind tunnel coming on stream this year, they're already well into the design of the 2024 car. So that won't be, some of that will be able to be designed in the new wind tunnel, but not the fundamentals of it, not the initial fundamentals. So I don't think you can expect that much of a step forward next year as a result of that. So that leaves them with quite a lot of ground to make up for 2025, which is the year that they're kind of hanging their hats on. And that's the year in which Norris is going to have to make a decision on his future. As I say, there's a lot of rumours in the paddock that Andreas Seidl, as you mentioned, might want him at Audi in 2026. That will be a gamble because Sauber, which will become Audi, are a lot further, they're even more uncompetitive than McLaren at the moment. And the other complicating factor in that situation is that Lando Norris is actually managed by Zak Brown, believe it or not, the McLaren CEO. So
surely a conflict of interest somewhere along the lines.
You might say that, Harry. I wouldn't possibly comment, but
I would love to be in the contract negotiation room when that is going on between himself and his boss and his manager. That would be brilliant. I'm sure Zak Brown brings two hats. Look, we're currently under red flag conditions because of a crash for Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. Session should be getting underway in about a minute or so, less than that. But Rosanna's down on the ground.
Certainly am, and I've just seen Carlos Sainz come back into the Ferrari garage, had a bit of a chat with his engineers, as the drivers often do when there's been an incident. Then he headed to the back of the garage to take off his helmet and sort of sort himself out. And then his trainer Rupert's just come back through into the paddock, carrying the helmet and the physio mat and all the bits and pieces that drivers like to take with them into the garage ahead of a session. So a shorter session for Carlos Sainz than he would have liked. Quite a bit of damage there on the Ferrari, but hopefully they've got enough time to turn things around, ready for qualifying this afternoon, especially as Carlos has been looking pretty strong and pretty comfortable with the car, more so than Charles. I think understanding that it's not working well in general, but he seems to be, just as we were saying yesterday during the sessions, that he seems to just get his head down and crack on with it, whereas Charles a little bit more vociferous about it.
Just a bit of news, everybody, on the engine front. We just had one of the documents from the FIA about a new power unit element for this weekend, and Pierre Gasly in the Alpine has taken a new combustion engine, new turbocharger, new MGUH and MGUK, and that's his fourth of the season, and he's only allowed 4, and we're only in race 8. So definitely some grid penalties for the Alpine team coming on down the line.
Yeah, they've already had a few as well, not due to those issues, but due to communication issues as well with the Alpine team.
There's a wider point to make about that, actually, which is that last year, Alpine/Renault introduced a whole new engine philosophy, following the sort of engine architecture that Mercedes pioneered in 2014, and which Honda also now use. I won't go into the details of that because it's quite complicated. It's to do with where the compressor and the turbo both sit.
We've got 21 minutes.
And Renault followed that philosophy last year, but they had a lot of reliability problems, and it was one of Fernando Alonso's frustrations at the team. He was saying he kept claiming he'd lost 50 or 60 points, and he was absolutely right, to reliability. Now, Alpine's excuse for that was, well, it was better to get the performance from the engine initially, and then we'll fix the reliability into the second season. Problem is, they haven't completely fixed the reliability. That's very clear from this season so far.
Yeah, there is certainly pressure, I think, on both of the Alpine drivers. Session back underway now. You'll hear the cars going around in the background. Lewis Hamilton has just had an off into turn 1, rejoins through turn 2. There's a bit of Pirelli advertising on the corner there, and he drives right on through it and rejoins the track. Everybody back out on the intermediate tyres, but of course we will have no Carlos Sainz, who is out after a crash. So as Rosanna was saying, though, down in the pits as she watched on Carlos getting back to the garage, they will have a few hours to get that car ready for qualifying. This is the sound of Lewis Hamilton, so I think we're just going to see how that little off in turn 1 happened. He comes into the braking zone, tries to turn left and doesn't turn left.
Yeah, just locks up the left front, under rotates on entry, and has to go through and cut turn 1. That's something we might see here at the start of the Grand Prix tomorrow. We see that new wall that's been added between turn 1 and turn 2, preventing drivers from going straight on. So as we've seen in the past, many drivers cut that section as they run out of room, running side by side at the start of the Grand Prix.
We haven't talked much yet about Lance Stroll, I think, in this session. And that's because he's currently down in 18th. Here's Piastri, first of all.
We expect heavier rain in 10 minutes' time.
Should I cross-check that?
Yeah, I think we need our own Askew update on that one as well. So you're usually a few steps ahead of the team. So we'll give you an update on that as well, as Askew gets to work very quickly. But we haven't talked much about Lance Stroll. The only Canadian in the field, and it will be, of course, his home race. We had Nicholas Latifi here as well last year for Williams, sadly no longer here. And Lance Stroll makes his way down the back straight. Askew weather update?
Stand by.
Stand by. Sorry, I thought you were ready. He's not. I'll continue talking then about Lance Stroll. So clearly he's not quite on par with Fernando Alonso, who would be, I suppose. But he's in such a tricky situation, I think, if you're Lance Stroll, when clearly your seat is kind of safe, surely, no matter what, because his dad owns the team, Lawrence Stroll. And Lance Stroll is not a bad driver either. Let's make that clear. He's been on podiums in cars that perhaps weren't always necessarily supposed to be on podiums. He's scored pole positions before, one pole position before, and there's a really good driver in there. But I think at the moment the bottom line is Aston Martin should be second in the constructors, and they're not, and that's because Lance Stroll has not scored as many points as Fernando Alonso.
No, he's still the best Canadian driver on the grid. But yeah, he's like you said, he's not performing alongside his new teammate Fernando Alonso, and his dad does own the team. We know that, but he's invested so much money into this program, along with his partners and sponsors involved in this Aston Martin team. They expect excellence, especially with a car that's performing.
They do, but it's Lawrence Stroll's lifetime dream for his son to be world champion, and I don't think that support for his son is going to stop until such a point where Lance decides he doesn't want to do it anymore. Do you want to hear a little sort of observational anecdote from this morning to do with Strolls?
Always.
So Lawrence Stroll is here, and the Aston Martin sort of tent in the paddock is right next to the loo. Okay.
Oh, the glamour.
Is that by accident?
Well, I don't know, but you can see what you think about what I'm about to say. Lawrence Stroll walked out of the Aston Martin tent this morning, followed by a security guard. Walked all of 15 feet to the loo. The security guard waited outside. Lawrence came back out again, and the security guard followed him back the 25 feet to the Aston Martin hospitality. Now, I don't know about you two, but I don't think Lawrence Stroll's under any particular threat in the paddock at the Canadian Grand Prix.
I thought everyone was a company to the loo round here. Is that not how it works? He's got prime parking as well. Have the Strolls. The two Aston Martins are literally right opposite the bridge where you get to walk in. Not quite where we are. We're further down by Daniel Ricciardo now. He's a reserve driver. He has to park further away. And actually, we almost found ourselves into the canoe basin that is on the side here. The rowing. Did they not do canoeing as well? My producer told me it was rowing. It is a basin. I'm talking to my producer here. Terrible broadcasting. They did, I'm certain of it. Anyway, back to finish that point on Stroll then, minus the toilet chat. A home race, Ollie. Good pressure, bad pressure?
It's good pressure. You have to turn it into good pressure. You know, this is a big weekend for him. as we keep saying, a potential chance for him to shine as he has in the past in the wet conditions. He has his only pole position and was the front row start as well, both in wet conditions in years past. So certainly a good chance for him this weekend. As we look at the weather pattern, it's difficult to predict this one. It's a scattered showers entering the Montreal area. It's not an organized system of weather that we're seeing. So very random scattered showers.
The back straight runs parallel to the Olympic Basin, a huge rectangular basin created for rowing and canoeing in Montreal, the 1976 Summer Olympics. That's for my producer Paddy there, and for all of you who are intrigued by the basin chat. And that is concrete.
That you almost entered this morning.
That I almost
Why aren't you mentioning that one, huh?
Well, I did. I brought it up.
I want to hear about this. Is this the car on the bank?
We feel like we've mainly talked about car parking so far, but it is a big issue here at the Canadian Grand Prix. So we were sent down our usual one-way lane, which runs parallel with where they do the rowing. Or where they did the rowing and still do. And really, you keep going and going and going, and then the grass on the banks gets steeper and steeper and steeper, and we're normally right at the very end. And it's been fine the last couple of days, but because we had
grass
so
turns
much
into mud when there's rain.
Exactly.
And he tries to run up it. Well, yes. I did instigate.
You encouraged, and you said, if you're going to get up there, Harry, you're going to have to floor it. And that I did. And we made it up, and then suddenly we weren't going forwards anymore. We were going backwards. I tried to hit the brake. Nothing was happening. Thankfully, we then slid back down onto the tarmac and managed to get going again. But honestly, that was a scary moment for us.
Grip was very poor.
It was,
Lewis.
Lewis.
Like it's hold on, dominated by temps.
Grip is very poor in the mud as well for us this morning. Yes, Max Verstappen back to the action, going quickest and continues to go quickest. So purple, sector 1, sector 2, now closing the lap again.
Crosses the line now. There we go.
Yeah, so it takes another half a second off of his time. So 1.6 seconds quicker than Carlos Sainz, who is no longer in the session.
Can I just put one final point on the car parking drama?
Yes.
Right. Okay. There's two people in a car.
Yeah.
It's a wet bank. Might require a bit of skill. Now I know that Ollie is not insured. But in that situation, might it not have been tempting to give the racing driver the controls of the car?
There wasn't time. And also, I was just convinced. I thought we had a 4x4, so I was convinced it'd be fine. And there were cars already up there, but it wasn't happening. And I think the Toyota Prius that was behind us,
ironically filled with Pirelli personnel.
Yes, the Pirelli personnel behind us were really enjoying our efforts. We did manage to safely park, and then Ollie and myself got the speedboat in to the bridge, so that then enters this wonderful paddock that we have here. This is the sound of George Russell just doing a quick run off through turns 8 and 9. Did we get your weather update in the end or not?
Did you not listen?
I was scattered, so I wasn't listening. Max Verstappen then has the fastest lap time, 1:23.1, 1.6 seconds ahead of Carlos Sainz, who is out of this session now after crashing and causing a red flag. Leclerc is third. Tsunoda up there in fourth, ahead of Hulkenberg, rounds out the top 5. Then it's Norris, Alonso, Magnussen, Gasly, Albon, the top 10. Piastri, Russell, Bottas, De Vries, Hamilton, the top 15. Stroll, Perez, Ocon, Zhou, and Sargent, 20th and last, as Fernando Alonso approaches the final chicane. Andrew.
And another update from the FIA. That incident earlier between Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon at the final chicane, that is going to be investigated after the session. Now, don't get too excited, because normally in free practice nothing happens. They just get a sort of slap on the wrist or something. I don't suppose that this will be any different, but the fact that it happened on 2 consecutive laps might make them more prone to do something. But Sainz has already punished himself enough, you might argue, with that crash at turn 1.
Yeah, quite possibly. This is the sound of his teammate going into the braking zone of the hairpin. Up through the gears.
Still, the session has been rainless, so it's been a consistent drying track, as we see a clear drying line going down the back straightaway on board here with Charles Leclerc. Hitting the brakes for the final chicane. All looks tidy. Staying off the paint on the right-hand side, trying to get the power down, heads to the line, 2 personal best sectors, and goes to P2.
Nice lap time.
Yeah, just above 2/10 off of Max Verstappen, so that's good to see.
Yeah, but Max is finding even more time on this run at the moment. Well, the middle sector he certainly was. Here's Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm coming in, mate. Just waiting for time.
Copy.
Hamilton's out there on the inters at the moment, down in 16th, so he's coming in this lap. Verstappen does find time. It mainly all came in the middle sector, and in the end it was less than a tenth, or less than half a tenth, but he extends his gap at the top. Alonso, though, slots into third in his Aston Martin.
Now it's
and
raining.
Finally, the rain has arrived. You were right. I think you can call that as an Askew prediction.
Yeah, both the teams and myself agreed on that one.
Yeah, so it's only practice, but that radio message from Hamilton, obviously not entirely happy with what's going on out there. They're not looking that good at the moment, Mercedes, in the wet conditions. George Russell's only 13th, Lewis Hamilton down in 16th. Can't read anything into it really, but the normal quick guys are up there. Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso. Magnussen's just popped up to fourth ahead of Carlos Sainz. Mercedes aren't joining them. Might mean nothing, might mean something. Just want to keep an eye on.
Could that be a situation where they're just not being able to switch on the tire and get the tire in the right temperature window?
It very much could be that, because that's been a bit of a consistent theme for them through the season and last season, in fact.
Yeah, it certainly has. Well, the rain is coming down then. So, Rosanna, what's the latest? Is it heavy in the pit lane?
Yes, it really is, Harry. It is coming down much heavier than it was earlier on, where there were just a few drops. But it really is coming down sort of on a diagonal, not straight down, just slightly on the diagonal, not sideways. There you go, getting technical with my rain vocabulary. I think it's probably going to stick around as well. It seems like it's here as I'm just looking up to the sky to see the clouds. It's just been a grey, overcast day all day long, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But this sets us up nicely for qualifying, I think. But I am surprised about Hamilton.
My right mirror is hanging. It's sort of flying off. It's got to be understood.
That was Valtteri Bottas just complaining about his mirror hanging off. He's just coming into the final sector now. And it's suddenly, the rain is coming down because suddenly the visibility has really decreased. The spray that is coming off the track makes it really difficult to see the cars on the screens that we're watching. And Lewis Hamilton certainly still making his way around the track, so he hasn't completely called it quits, Rosanna.
No, absolutely. That's why I was saying I was surprised about Lewis, because yesterday after the FP2 session, he was saying, you know, I love the rain, so let's try and have some fun tomorrow. And you sort of think that's when these champions come alive, even with a bit of a difficult car. But, you know, sitting down in P10 at the moment, you'd kind of expect him to maybe be a bit further up, especially after yesterday's showing. I know that was in the dry conditions and they went out at the right time on the softer tyres. But yes, Lewis Hamilton, we know he goes well here at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and then you add in a bit of rain, and normally some things quite nice and spicy happen, don't they? But maybe not this particular day. He'll hope he can turn it on for qualifying, I'm sure. But yes, the rain's still falling, very heavy, very heavy.
Very heavy. Find a bit of shelter, Rosanna. Get the cagoule, get the umbrella out. You've got 7 minutes and 49 seconds left to brave the rain. And we're in the dry commentary box here, and we're just seeing a nice replay of Valtteri Bottas. He's coming to the pits now, but he was talking about his right wing mirror bouncing and nearly falling off, and he's even got his left hand out of the cockpit to try and hold on to it.
Yeah, just over 7 minutes remaining now as rain starts to fall in this session. All of these teams and drivers got some solid running there in FP3, so I'm not sure we're going to see anyone else go back on track, potentially risking damage to their cars heading into qualifying with just, a couple of hours before we go head into that all-important session.
Yeah, qualifying, I think, is at 4 o'clock local time here in Canada. And who is still out on track? Well, the Alfa Romeo Zhou Guanyu, but he comes into the pits.
Pitting.
Yep, and Charles Leclerc is in the final sector now, coming down the back straight, and then comes into the pits. So, yeah, everybody into the pit lane. Just coming back to that Hamilton chat and sounding, a little bit like he didn't want to go out there anymore, a little bit down. We've heard that before, though. We've heard him say, as recently as Barcelona, no, I'm probably not going to get through to Q3, Q2 might be a struggle. And we've had that rhetoric before, so it's hard to take that. We've got to take it with a pinch of salt now, really, haven't we? I think those kind of comments. Yes, is the answer. Rosanna.
Well, it's interesting. I've just seen Logan Sargent sprinting out of the Williams garage back to the hospitality unit, trying not to get too wet in his boots. But the other thing about the rain here, and it's sort of unique to this circuit, and Sergio Perez was touching on it yesterday, it gets very dark as well when it rains here. So the visibility is really difficult. And we've already seen some near misses with Carlos Sainz and George Russell, etc. So you don't really want, in the few hours before qualifying, you don't want to have a moment where you just didn't see a car in front of you. And the spray that has been kicked up in the pit lane, coming up off the start-finish straight and onto the pit lane, makes me think that the spray around the track must be so difficult to see through as a driver when you're travelling at such speeds. So perhaps that's another reason, the visibility making it difficult as well. And it does just get a little bit dark here. And it's only, 25 past 1 here in the afternoon in Montreal. So you'd think it'd be nice and bright despite the rain. But yes, it does get a little bit murky.
No, you're absolutely right. And even just looking out of our commentary box window, normally the high-rise buildings of the central business district of Montreal are fairly clear, but now being shadowed and overcast with the rain clouds that are coming in, as quite rightly it continues to pour down. And we do still, though, have a car on the track, and it's Charles Leclerc who is out there on the intermediate tyre.
I'd be surprised if he continues. I would be.
He's coming down the back straight now, so let's see what he does. And you could just wading through a river almost, coming towards the chicane, and you're quite right, Ollie. He comes straight into the pits.
Yeah. Let's take the time to go through the order here, because I don't think anyone's going to run any quicker than what they've posted already.
Who stands out for you? We've got Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso, Magnussen, and Sainz.
I want to go down to 12th and 13th, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, doing almost the exact same time. Oscar clipping Lando by just a couple of hundredths of a second. That's impressive to me, because Lando is a driver in my mind who's one of the best drivers in the wet. From England, he's used to those conditions.
And Oscar Piastri, one of the 3 rookies on this grid as well, never raced in Canada before either, so you're quite right to pick up on that as well. But it is Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso, Magnussen, Sainz, the top 5. Gasly, Stroll, Tsunoda, Bottas, Hamilton, the top 10. Hulkenberg, Piastri, Norris, Albon, Russell, the top 15. De Vries, Perez, Zhou, Ocon and Sargent, the top 20, with just a few minutes left of this FP2 session. We'll have a couple of hours, FP3 session I should say, before we have qualifying later on this afternoon here in Canada, with rain still expected to fall. It's been at about a 60% chance all day so far, but consistent rainfall forecast. So that's going to make qualifying, I think, really exciting. We saw here last year the likes of Fernando Alonso really managing to get the wet conditions to work for him in his Alpine back then, and of course had a front row start. Could he be doing that again, this time in an Aston Martin that is packed with upgrades, particularly on the side pods that feed then into the floor of that car? But Alonso's day certainly finished for free practice 3 at least, as the headrest is removed and he clambers out of his Aston Martin. And there's a reason nobody is going out right now. It's because it is absolutely pelting it down. And in fact, some of the fans are starting to get out of the grandstands to try and find some cover, because there is literally a river running down the main straight and into the pit lane. You could almost swim in it, and you wonder, Ollie, if this continues, this could put a worry for if we get qualifying going at all.
Yeah, but like I said earlier, the rain showers are scattered. Yes, if this amount of rain were to continue through the day, the track would be flooded. You know, we wouldn't be racing in these conditions. There's no exaggeration that it's absolutely dumping down. Yeah, so very difficult conditions with the hydroplaning in these cars, and with how quickly they can lose control, it becomes dangerous.
Hydroplaning, is that aquaplaning? Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
I
think I call it hydroplaning.
Is that an American thing?
Maybe.
Because you say, for the back straight, you say straightaway, and I think that's an American thing.
I think.
It's fine. Yeah. We're allowed. Yeah. Just. Yeah. So we'll go with whatever you want to go with, Ollie. You're new. It's fine. The rain continues to pelt down here, but it's only a minute or so left. So finally, I suppose, at least for our 20 drivers, maybe with the exception of Carlos Sainz, who lost 30 minutes of this session thanks to a red flag that he brought out by crashing. some decent running, at least, for the first proper time this weekend. Free practice 2 was extended, but this is the similar conditions that we're going to get for later on this afternoon, so the most relevant for qualifying. Lando Norris is out of the car straight away, talking to his mechanics and engineers for a debrief in the McLaren garage. As Ollie said earlier, he finished down in 13th, only a couple of thousandths of a second between himself, a hundredth of a second between himself and Piastri down in 12th and 13th. Good lap time from Kevin Magnussen as well to get himself up into 4th in these wet conditions. It is tricky to read a true order when it is like this, but the Hasses were good here last year as well in a wet qualifying. They both qualified. I believe Magnussen was 5th and Mick Schumacher at the time was just behind him in 6th.
Yeah, an extremely tight midfield here, even in the wet condition in free practice 3 from, what is it, from 6th place to 13th is just 3/10. 3/10 covering that group.
It is tight. It is tight in the midfield, and that is exciting as well. But at the end of free practice 3, as the clock counts down, no more running happening as the rain continues to fall here. Max Verstappen is fastest, a 1:23.106. Then it's Leclerc, Alonso, Magnussen, Sainz with work to do on that Ferrari as they try and fix it and get it ready in time for qualifying later on. Then it's Gasly, Stroll, Tsunoda, Bottas, Hamilton, the top 10. Hülkenberg, Piastri, Norris, Albon, Russell, the top 15. De Vries, Perez, Zhou, Ocon and Logan Sargent, 20th of our runners after free practice 3.
Thank you very much, Harry Benjamin. So that brings us to the end of the practice sessions here in Montreal, ahead of the Canadian Grand Prix. Torrential rain now. Will it last until the vital qualifying session later on this evening? My thanks to Andrew Benson, Oliver Askew and Harry Benjamin for talking us through that session. We'll be back on 5 Sports Extra and the BBC Sport website for qualifying later on. We hope you can join us then. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.